Hi, I'm Tracy Flickraft, and I'm here with Venture to Impact to talk to you about brand and positioning. Last week, we talked about value proposition and how you can position yourself with your audience to allow them to understand why they should donate to you, work with you, or support you. Today, we're going to talk about those same audiences and how we can segment them and create a journey to customize your communications and create a long-term strategy that will help you get more funds and more donations from those donors and more support from your community overall. So today's agenda, we are providing you with a workbook to work through while we go through audience segmentation. What is it? Why is it important? As well as journey mapping and how you can create some communications for those segmentations and tools that will help with building journeys and executing them, and where and how to apply those segmentations and journeys. We'll also go through what the homework is and talk about how you can prepare it within the workbook that you have in front of you. So let's answer the question of what is audience segmentation. Segmentation means taking your whole community of potential stakeholders, which include donors, beneficiaries, participants, staff, and volunteers, and breaking it up into smaller groups or segments to speak to each segment effectively. There are a lot of common segmentation categories. You can look at age, location, areas of interest, gender, education level, etc. Some good items to think about as a nonprofit or a NGO is engagement preference, whether they like to be communicated through email or a phone call or maybe a written letter. Also looking at their giving history. Are they big donors? Are they little donors? Do they provide you support on a monthly or maybe yearly basis? And then the type of participation they have with your organization. What is the connection to you? Are they a volunteer, a donor, a staff, or maybe just a board member? How do you talk to them in a way that is appropriate and effective so that you can get the results that you're looking to achieve? I want you to think about your community in terms of what makes each segment different. So whether it's a staff or beneficiary or volunteer or donor, what are the big differences in how you interact with your audience so that you are able to segment along those lines and create communications that make sense to that audience. And that's where you can apply your value propositions so that you are creating a unique perspective of what you offer to that individual and what that individual can provide to you. So if you know one segment is going to donate more, would you want to spend more time tailoring your message toward them? Yes, absolutely. That is a big question for a lot of NGOs is who do we target when we are asking for money or asking for support? And how do we make sure we're spending our time on the resources and individuals who are going to provide the most donations or the most support towards us? So why is it important? Well, like we talked about earlier, if you're spending your time focusing on everybody, you may not reach the goals that you're wanting to. But if you're able to hone in on the few individuals or the few groups that you know are going to give you the results you're wanting or achieve the goals that you need, that will allow you to segment your audience effectively and focus on them so that you can create a more efficient and effective community strategy that achieves your goals in the long run. The type of communication or events that excite volunteers will be different than what excites your donors. And that's something to take in mind. So if you are creating communications that is geared towards everybody, you might be missing a big chunk of your engagement because a volunteer may not really care what your staff is doing, but they want to know what they can be involved in to volunteer their time, where a donor may not really have the time to donate their time, but they want to be able to know where they can donate money. So creating that tailored communication so you know what excites the particular audience will help you create a communication that is geared towards what you're wanting to get out of that individual or that group. And that also speaks to what are the different channels that each segment prefers to be communicated on. Do they want emails? Do they want text? Do they want a personalized phone call? Or maybe they want a handwritten letter. If you are able to understand how they are wanting, you're able to set up a better strategy so that you can work with that individual or that group to give them the information that they want, that they're actually going to be able to read and understand and then take action on. So the question is, how do you segment your audience? What are you looking at? What are the groupings that you'd want to be putting together so that you can communicate better to them? You can look at donors, staff, beneficiaries, volunteers. This is the connection to your organization or how they participate with you. Breaking them down into those categories will allow you to create 4 different communication strategies that will speak to what they need and what they're wanting out of the relationship with you. Another way is to talk about the donation value that they are providing. So if you're looking at donors specifically, are they more likely to donate? Are they likely to not donate? Have they previously donated before and you just don't know? So creating those groups will allow you to speak to the ones who are most likely to donate more often and more personalized, and not spend all your time donating to the people who, or excuse me, not spend your time talking to those people who are not likely to donate. Or the dollar amount. If you want to speak to the high value donors who are spending maybe $1,000 or $5,000 at a time, you really want to create a strategy that excites them about their donation and allows them to see what you're doing with the money that they're providing you. Medium donors, maybe these are the donors who just do it more often with $100 here or there. So you want to speak to them on a different level than you'd speak to your low or no value donors. And then obviously a category of unknown if you don't know if they've donated or you don't know how much they're donating at a time. Those are different segments to look at your audiences at a dollar amount for those particular donors. And then maybe breaking it into active volunteers or inactive volunteers. So if you have a group of 100 volunteers and you have 20 really active volunteers and 80 inactive volunteers, creating strategy to excite the active volunteers and give them information of what's going on and what they can get involved in. And maybe you tailor the inactive volunteers communication to see if they're just want to volunteer once a year, or if they're wanting to come off your email list or your communication strategies. Another one is by age. This is helpful if you're wanting to communicate on different channels. Maybe your older group doesn't get text or doesn't do social, so you can communicate more to the younger groups through those channels versus handwritten notes to the older ones. Or segmenting against gender. If you know women participate more as volunteers, but men participate more as donors, breaking that gender categorization up so that you can communicate women one way and communicate with men another, and help achieve your goals in a more successful way. Here's an example of venture to impact segmentations and how they've done a few of their audiences. In the first column, you'll see by project. So they're taking all their volunteers who have signed up for Rwanda in 2020, or all their volunteers who signed up for Romania in 2019. Same with India. And then they have a category for non-committed, those who haven't signed up but maybe are still part of their program, and they do want to spend some time talking to those individuals. They just don't have a project aligned to them. So you can see in these boxes, which if you open up your workbook, you'll be able to see the examples in there and understand how Venture to Impact is doing their segmentations. So you can look to your audience and create a similar audience segmentation with the project, or the audience name and the identifier, so that you can later know who you're communicating with. That middle column is separated by likelihood to donate. So Venture to Impact has created most likely to donate, not likely to donate, current donors who might be open to increasing the amount, and unknown. Again, that catch-all category of they may not have the information or the data to know how much they donated, when they donated, or if they're going to donate again. So keeping those individuals in the loop and communicating to them differently than they would somebody who is most likely to donate. And then in that far right column, by company. So they've separated it by what company their volunteers work for. So it's Salesforce volunteers, Netflix volunteers, Microsoft volunteers, and these are just identified by who they volunteer, who the volunteers work with. So then they can speak to Salesforce about their donor matching. They can talk to Netflix about the volunteer trips that Netflix is supporting, or Microsoft, in the way that it makes sense for those Microsoft volunteers. A note on this one, you also see other. There's going to be another catch-all because not everybody is going to fall into a Salesforce, Netflix, or Microsoft volunteer. So that other allows them to still communicate with a large group of volunteers who don't necessarily align with a particular company. That being said, here are some general tips for segmentation. First, you're going to want to divide up your stakeholders into the most basic categories. So don't go right into really specific targeted categories because you may find that creates too much work right off the bat. So get them into larger basic categories like donors, staff, volunteers, beneficiaries. These are how they are affiliated with your organizations. So then you could break it down further. You can dive into donors in many different ways, and volunteers in many different ways, but you're looking at the overall basic categories when you first start looking at your audience. Then look at the unique characteristics of each of those segments. So maybe your donors, you can separate into the high value, they're going to donate a lot of money, versus the little or no value. And again, making sure that you are keeping that unknown or grouping for those that you don't have enough data on. Also, don't be too specific. Like I mentioned before of doing the basic categories, use generalizations. Again, if you are getting too specific too quickly without having the basics, you're going to create yourself a lot of work, and it may not be sustainable. Make sure you are creating that catch-all segment, the unknown, so that people don't fall off your communication strings. They're still getting communicated with, even if they don't fall into a particular category. They still may want to volunteer, they still may want to donate, but they just may not fall in line with a particular category that you created for those high donors or the no donors. And then you're always going to want to do A/B tests. So this is going to help you understand your audiences and create better segmentations later down the road. So if you're testing audience with whether subject lines in email or the response to handwritten notes or phone calls, you're going to be able to track the success of these strategies and be able to optimize accordingly. So if you know those high donors will continue to donate, if you're giving them a phone call before a big fundraising event, then keep doing that. But maybe you test it with a handwritten note or even a printed document so that you can send it out and understand what is getting your audience to convert or take the action that you're wanting them to take. Keep in mind, like I've mentioned many times, there are a million ways to segment your audiences. But if you are creating too many segments, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of work, which may not show the correlating impact. So while segmentation is good, too much is counterproductive. So use your success metrics of your messaging to understand what is effective and what you could do with the segments that you have, or the basic segments that you're currently using. Now that you've created segmentations, you're able to go back and look at those value propositions that you created last week. You can apply those VPs to your different segments and start thinking about how to create a strategy that effectively communicates with those segments using your value propositions. And what we're going to talk to next is creating journey mapping for those segmentations using your value propositions. Journey mapping for nonprofits. What is journey mapping? It is creating and planning a clear communication strategy for each segment to ensure your audiences are being communicated with regularly and with content that is relevant to their relationship with you. You are creating you're creating a communication that is sustainable and able to provide them information about upcoming events or opportunities that you don't necessarily have to run around and create new content each time. So this talks to why we should create journeys for our branding and positioning. It really comes down to the time that you're spending with communications. One-off or ad hoc messaging is really time consuming, and it doesn't allow you to see the whole picture from your audience's perspective. So creating a journey will give you the opportunity to see the gaps in communication or personalized messaging to raise engagement with audience or get them to take the action that you're wanting them to take. So journey mapping is really stepping back and allowing your communications to be sustainable by creating a map from the time that they enter your organization to the time that they either donate, they volunteer, or they become a sustaining member of working with your organization for many, many years to come. You are going to want to understand how you're communicating with them so that you can create a sustainable communication plan that will allow you to communicate with them on a regular basis. So we can talk about how to create a journey. Again, using your workbook as we go through this will help you understand the content and prepare you for the homework assignment that you'll have after this session. So here is an example of journey mapping for a donor who has just signed up to donate. It's called the onboarding journey. And we're going to use Greta as an example. She goes to your website and she signs up to learn more because she's wanting to know what you do. She's wanting to know how to get involved, and she's potentially wanting to donate some of her money to your organization. So she's wanting to know more information. So after she clicks and enters in her email, she gets a welcome email. And this is a trigger so that it's coming within 24 hours of her signing up saying, hey, thank you for signing up. Here's information about our organization. Here's where you could donate. Here's where you can sign up to volunteer. She reads it. She says, great, I have some information. Now I can think about it. She doesn't take any action because she just isn't sure where or how she's going to get involved. So 5 days later, she gets a phone call from your organization with an introduction, say, hey, Greta, we know you were interested. Here's some information. Do you have any questions? Are you willing to donate at this time to help us with our mission and to create an impact? Greta's interested at that point. She's made a connection with you, but she hasn't been paid yet, and she wants to take some time to figure out what she can contribute and when she should. So 3 days after that phone call, she gets an email with an event update and then information about how she become a sustaining member and donate on a monthly basis for a lower amount than if she were to just give a one-off donation. she's interested in that, and she gets excited because she's able to donate $50 a month versus a couple $100 at one time. So she wants to sign up because she wants to be involved with you after talking with you and after learning more about your organization. So she signs up then to become a sustaining member. After she submits her donation, she gets a real-time trigger saying, thank you for your donation. Here's your tax receipt. Here's more information about what our organization is going to do with that fund. And then she's very excited because she feels good. She made a contribution and she knows where it's going to go. So she's feeling great. Now, 7 days later, she gets she gets a printed letter with a handwritten note that says, thank you, Greta, for donating and becoming a sustaining member. It also includes a story about one of the beneficiaries and how your organization is helping that beneficiary. So now Greta feels even more connected to you because she knows where her money's going. She gets this firsthand story from a beneficiary. She has a letter in her hand with handwritten thank yous. She feels really good. And now she's going to continue to work with you. And you have created a communication strategy that allows her to go from just signing up and being curious to being a committed volunteer and donor. Now, once she ends this journey, she can go into a lot of other journeys, whether it's sign up to volunteer, here's more information about donating more, or if she wanted to work with the organization, how could she do that? So keep in mind that when one journey ends, it doesn't necessarily mean that communication ends. It just means that they can go a different way, depending on their behaviors, their actions, or their interest with your organization. Here are general tips for journey mapping. And using your workbook, you can see some of the examples that we have. You're going to want to list out all the types of communication that is currently being sent to your audience. So this would include email, this would include phone calls, this would include printed material or social media, how you're communicating with your audience through social platforms. Also, here is where you'd want to include the timing on when your audience receives messaging. So you have a general idea of if they're getting a message immediately after they donate, or is it taking a couple weeks or months for them to get communication confirmation that you've received their donations. That way you can look at it and you can optimize accordingly, or you can see if it's hitting the goal of that communication. Once you've listed out all those types, you can separate out communication by segment. So how are you going to want to talk to a donor versus staff versus a volunteer? How are you going to want to talk to a high value donor versus a low value donor? And think about that communication of and effort of what you're going to put into each segment. Keep in mind that some messages will exist across multiple segments. So if you think about thank you for donating, or sign up for sustaining membership, these are communications that you may send to everybody in your organization, regardless of their segment, and that's okay. Just identify when they should be receiving that based on their action or their interest, and make sure that you are tailoring that message towards that audience versus just sending it out mass blast without knowing how that person is interacting with your organization. You can also add in additional messaging that will help different segments engage more or better understand your value proposition. This means don't just stick with 2 or 3 messages, but think about all the different ways that your different segments are going to want to engage with you or better understand what you do. How and what can you be messaging to them so that you can really achieve your goals? And add those messaging in, even if it's a long shot, even if it's a long-term goal. Having that information into your strategy is going to help you achieve that more quickly than if you don't attempt to include that messaging. Identify the communication on when and how it should be sent based on best practices or testing. We could spend hours looking at best practices or even how to test. So we're not going to do that today, but on your own time, with your own research, you can understand what are the best practices with journey mapping or with communications that you should be sending to your donors or your volunteers or any stakeholders within your organization. And also talking about testing. What are some good tests you can do, whether it's subject line testing in email or channel testing? Is it better to have a phone call or to send a text? Maybe some social media testing. Do your audiences get more engaged when you have regular social postings versus when you don't? These are all different ways you could test, and you need to go out and do the research to understand what is your best option for testing, or even what are best practices for creating journey maps and testing your communications with within a journey. So again, many types of journeys. Several journeys will exist over the course of your stakeholders' life cycle. And the best way to start is to look at the ideal life cycle and communication that occurs is if everyone you communicate with took the desired action that you want out of them. So once you've established that, you can break down communications to create journeys based on if they do or don't take that action. So for instance, welcome or onboarding journeys are just good ideas for all of your potential stakeholders or current stakeholders who come into your organization, and you want them to understand what you do and what you need out of them. Other journeys to think about would be a monthly donor communication. Maybe through email you are messaging them with updates to what their funds are providing to your beneficiaries. Again, a thank you for donating is really important. If people are giving you money, they want to know A, that you received it, and B, what you're doing with those funds so that they can continue to feel good about donating to you. Another idea is abandoned cart or donation journey. If they take an action to donate but don't complete it for one reason or another, maybe they get distracted or maybe they lose internet. Understanding that they took the action and were at one point going to donate to you could call for a abandoned cart or donation journey where you send an email asking them to finish, or maybe you give them a phone call to understand why they didn't finish and if they would want to finish over the phone. New programs or urgent events needs are also good journeys to think about so that you can keep communicating to your audiences in meaningful ways that give them more information about what you need or how you need them to participate with you to continue your mission. Here's an example of what Venture to Impact has done with the journey. All project volunteers go through an onboarding journey, and they get 4 different types of communications through this journey. In email 1, this comes one day after signing up for the email, where they get general information about the project. They learn about the accommodations and travel. They also know what to expect while they are there, and then they get basic terms in the native language that they could start practicing before their trip. This is easy for you to see that in an email there's content blocks, so you could have 4 different paragraphs or 4 different content areas to provide information. You can list those out, put in details about what you're wanting, and then at the bottom here, track an engagement metric so that you can go back and understand what's successful and what's not successful, or identify any gaps that you may need to include, whether it's in a journey or a particular message. In email 2, you could see that the purpose of the email is to remind them that their trip is approaching and create a excitement for their upcoming trip. They send it out 15 days prior to the trip. They include a checklist of what they should pack and what they should put in their carry-on versus their checked bag. And it also provides any updates on the trip or agenda. While block 3 and 4 may be blank now, they could always add something in or tailor it for that particular trip. And then they also track their open rate down at the bottom, just so they can go back and know why people aren't opening or understand what they need to include to get more engagement out of it. 1 week before the trip, they set up a phone call with all the participants of that particular trip to join, to ask questions, to get introduced to the team leaders, to review the agenda, and then just ask general questions that the V2I team can answer. So this phone call is a phone meeting that allows them to get their participants excited, understand what they're going to be doing, and really engaged in what's going to happen when they get on the ground at that project. Note here that their engagement record is based on the participants who attended the call. And then another success metric that they're sharing here is based on if their participants felt like they were prepared when the time came for their trip. In the notes section, this is what they added so that they could optimize the future calls to allow more time for questions from their participants and ask if there's anything else that they need. So you could use this any way you want as far as notes, but just make sure that you are tracking this and keeping this all in one place so that you can go back and remember what was important and what was successful. Now, once that trip is over, the volunteers will receive a third email. And this is about the survey so that they can provide information and feedback that is important to the V2I team so that they can optimize their trips or optimize the communication before or during the trip. So this is 5 days after the trip has completed, and the email contains highlights of the trip, and then ask them to complete the survey, and then a link to the photo gallery so that they can go through photos that everyone's shared and see what happened on the trip if they were to miss anything. Again, we have the metrics and the success metrics so that they can track and know what is working and what's not working in this communication. So this is one example of many journeys that V2I has. In your workbook, you'll be able to see other mappings that they have put together. And we'd like you to start putting your journeys in here so that you can hold on to them, keep them in one place, and then share with other people in your organization if you wanted to optimize, get feedback on these journeys, or create a more sustainable strategy in the long run. Do keep in mind that journeys encompass all channels. So it's not just email journeys, it's not just social media journeys or phone journeys. Your customer journeys or your audience journeys really are across the board in every channel that you use to communicate with them. So include those in your journeys. Don't get into a place where you're only emailing them or you're only using phone interactions to communicate. Mix it up, because not everybody will answer the phone, not everybody will check email, not everyone is on social media or opens up their mail. So if you're mixing the different channels, you're more likely to engage with them more, and you're able to engage with them on a platform that they are comfortable using. There are a lot of different softwares and tools out there to help you with your journeys. There's MailChimp, which is an email service provider, and you could set up email journeys so they're automated and you don't have to do as much execution on a day-to-day basis. There's Donor Perfect, which allows you to tailor your messaging towards the different donors you have. There's HubSpot and Salesforce, which also provide discounted or accessible resources for you to set up automated journeys or methods of communications to better communicate with your audiences through a tool. You will have a mentor who can help you talk about these tools and what software would work best for your organization. So why is all of this important? Last week we talked about value proposition and why it's important to talk to your audience from the perspective of what it means for them to be involved with your organization. Audience segmentation and journey mapping is just an extension of how to better communicate with your audience. So to break it down, segmentation allows you to speak to your different audiences in the right channel at the right time. Journeys allow you to create a strategy where you talk to your audiences regularly with appropriate content. And together, creating journeys for segmented audiences make your messaging personalized and more meaningful for your donors. I want to talk to you a little bit about the homework assignment so that you can understand what you're looking at when you have it in front of you. And then what you'll be going through is identifying 3 audiences with at least one donor segment, and then creating a journey map for that donor with a strategy that includes 2 or more channels. So in front of you, you should have your workbook that looks like this. Last week, you created your own value proposition. That is in one tab. So if you wanted to add that in there so you can hold on to it, or maybe you add in a second or third draft in here so that you can have it in one place with your segmentation and mapping. For audience segmentations, the exercise that we're wanting you to do is to create a category within your community that is unique in how they interact or participate. Meaning, you are going to break down your audience, whether it's by type of participation or giving history, location, connection to organization, maybe it's gender, location, age, however you want to do it. We want you to create your own segmentation category and enter it in this document. Feel free to look at the examples and erase them out to add your own in, or to add more at the bottom. This is your workbook and it should be reflective of your audiences and how you'd want to segment them. If you go over to the journey mapping tab, you'll see the information in here to create a journey. There's instructions up here, which we ask you to list out all the different communication channels that you have, whether it's email, social, phone, or print. And please add more if you do have more that you're currently using, or delete out the ones that you aren't, or think about adding any of these that you aren't currently using. Over here, we want you to list out those important journeys that you have, whether it's an onboarding for a trip, or donation impact for sustaining members, or maybe partner discovery so that you can communicate with potential partners. These are V21's important journeys, and we use them for examples, but you can erase those out and put your own in. Down here, we have a table for you to create your own journey. The purpose of the communication should be listed up here. Why are you sending out this email? Why are you making this phone call or posting this social media content? Then list out what channel it is. This would be email, social, or print, etc. And then the timing of communication. When does an individual receive this message? Down here is where you're going to add in the content. Now, do keep in mind that email most often is going to have multiple content levels or content blocks. So you can add in those. If you're making a phone call or posting on social media, you're really only going to need one content but maybe in a printed letter or note, and in an email, you're going to want to have 2 or 3 different content blocks or paragraphs. You can add those in here to track them. The engagement metric and the success metrics down here are, once you've sent it, you can track it on maybe a monthly, weekly, or annual basis so that you can know how successful this is and optimize your journey. V2I did create a example for you to look at, so you could take a look at this journey, or maybe one down here of donors who donate on a monthly basis, or even the NGO partner discovery. You could see how they're setting up their journeys, what they're including in the communications, and then they can go out, create that new email if they have to create a new email, write up that printed letter if they're sending something out by mail, or write up a talking track if they're making a phone call. Keep in mind that you can make this your own. You could do what you want in here, as long as you're creating a journey that is useful to your organization and that you are able to track it over the course of months or years. Down here, we added some tables so that you can plug them in. Again, you can change things based on what you're needing or how you operate best. So this workbook is going to be provided to you with this session. So please use this however you do want to, and complete the homework using this workbook, because it's going to make it a lot easier. I hope this has all been helpful, and I look forward to talking to you next week about storytelling in order to get those fundraisers going. Thank you. Have a good week.